Yeah. Hey everybody, welcome to Sustainiacs. I am Michael Vincent. I'm always the Sustainiacs. The people I have on are generally always Sustainiacs too, but they're newly discovered by you people. It's Jeff Barbee. And or Jeff, I guess Jeff Barbee, right? Jeffrey Barbee, I usually call you, but I've known you for a number of years, my friend. And why have you not been on? Is it because you're traveling all over the world?
I'm always busy, always on the road. Bangladesh, Australia. Here I am sitting in beautiful, sunny South Africa.
So you're just, I mean, you're everywhere, right? And that's what it is. It's just tracking you down to try and pin you down for an hour so that we can actually talk. But co-CEO, right?
Yep, co-CEO of Scarabtech.
Right, a founder of Scarabtech.
And
And a number of other things, right? I mean,
am.
an investigative journalist with a couple of awards, or at least one award, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Film director. Did you do Rocky, or what was the film?
No, I've been a film producer for television broadcast in the U.S. with PBS and also with the national media of Holland for about 15 years. And I'm also the director and producer of The High Cost of Cheap Gas, which is a movie all about what the global oil and gas business doesn't want you to know.
Is that it should be dirt cheap?
Oh, it's a lot of things, but
Oh,
we
I'm
could
sure
spend
there's a lot of.
We could spend a whole hour talking just about that. I can promise you.
Well, we might have to, man. I mean, this is like a treasure trove of podcasts, right? If
Oh
we
yeah.
just went down
Well,
rabbit.
if you want to do a 3-part series, I've got time.
Let's
You're paying the bills.
Let's do it, brother. Let's do a 3-part series. There you go. And it's born. That's why he's the director. He's like, you know what, people, we're going to just call this one Lord of the Rings Part 1. Okay.
Thanks for making time for me today, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for making time. How is South Africa these days, right?
It's fantastic. Price of eggs is super low. I think you can get a dozen for about $1. And
or a dollar, or a U.S. dollar, or rand, or what?
A U.S. dollar. $1 for a dozen eggs. Yep. I think that probably tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, there it is. There it is, right there. We've got it. We've got it. That's beautiful. So, among all these things that's going on, where do we want to start with part one? With Scarabtech? Let's talk about what the technology is. What you guys are doing there.
Great. I love talking about Scarabtech. Yeah.
Yeah, Scarabtech is very cool.
Yeah, thanks. And, it's been really exciting to connect with you all over the years on Scarabtech. And I know you have a South African subsidiary here. Or maybe it's I don't know if you guys
we're the subsidiary here in the U.S. Yeah.
You're the subsidiary there. Okay, yeah. So we have connected with you all at Ocean Plastic Technology for the last few years, working to combine some of our technology to do sort of an end run around some of the global plastic problem, especially the stuff that ends up going into the ocean and into the environment.
Yeah. So, hello carbon neutral energy, right? Goodbye plastic. Hello carbon neutral energy is what you guys. There's your tagline, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's a big idea, but ours works, and a lot of people have been trying to wrap their heads around getting pyrolysis to work. It's a technology that's actually been around for about 100 years, and this is the kind of technology that was used during World War II, during the German occupation of Paris, to drive Parisian taxis around. So this is a technology that is only now, though, coming into its most usefulness, because we at Scarabtech have done one thing that most other companies have not, which is be able to make high quality fuel that is either neutral or zero or less than zero carbon. So it's literally removing carbon from the atmosphere by producing fuel that is much cleaner than what's available on the open market on sort of the traditionally mined fuels.
Got you. Now, you're not trying to tell me that the Germans were taking plastics and utilizing pyrolysis to make fuel, are you?
I'm telling you that the French were doing it. Well, the Germans ran a fuel blockade on Paris. Yeah, French taxis created pyrolytic systems in the back of their cars, inside of the boot of the car, in the trunk. Then they actually piped the gas from the pyrolysis down straight into the carburetor, and they were running petroleum driven, so gasoline automobiles on pyrolytic gas during the occupation by the Germans of Paris in the 1940s.
You kidding? What were they? What were they using as a fuel in the pyro? What were they
Anything
burning?
they
Or
could get their hands on, wood, rubber, anything. That plastic was in its infancy at the time. But you have to remember that
yeah.
this process actually works similarly if you use biomass that's dried, as long as it's not too wet. So you could use walnut shells, or you could use anything like that that would make a combustible gas. And then they
So
were
anything
using
that
that
makes a
gas.
combustible gas, you can use this system for. Is that true with the system that you have now, or is that or have you refined it particularly for the petrochemicals and polymers?
Yes, we refined it to break down long chain polymers so that we could turn them back into petrochemicals affordably and cheaply. And I think this is most importantly, is that we do it where the plastic is a problem. And often that happens to be places where fuel is very difficult to come by and the people are paying a premium for it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting, and that's a solid point that you're talking about because it is. We're not talking about a refinery level system or volume system,
We're
right? We're
literally
not
talking about something that you can put in a small container, pull it out of the container, it can be working in a few days.
in a few days in turning plastics. So that is fantastic. All right, so I get it from where you have done your film and, and still produce films that you are. Would you call yourself an environmentalist or an actionist
Well,
or
I've actually always been I've been like a science journalist for my entire
okay,
career. Although I did used to work for many years for like the New York Times frontline reporting as a photojournalist, and
okay,
then I started writing. I started writing for the Guardian in London. So I've been a newspaper journalist for about 20 years, and I almost always cover science, environment. I just had a 12-part series. It's one of the longest series in the history of National Geographic magazine, and we did it for 4 years, following a Canadian company that was threatening the Okavango World Heritage Site here in Southern Africa with oil and gas extraction. So, when I look for partners within the sort of publishing world, I'm often working with organizations like National Geographic or The Guardian or the New York Times that are super dedicated to high quality journalism that is fact checked and has the ability to sort of go after some of these bigger players because they have lawyers on their team that protect us.
wow. So you're getting yourself in some trouble every once in a while, and it's all just reporting facts, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's what we talked about. Like the oil industry wants you not to know certain things, right? So you go in and discover these, and then they want to sue you for uncovering truths.
Sometimes that does happen.
Yeah,
I've been personally threatened with lawsuits on numerous occasions by the oil and gas business. Yes. But I
yeah,
think more importantly, I think it's the, when we look at these products, whether we're looking at plastics or something else, we don't see the oil and gas business as our enemy necessarily. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the people who work for them, they are doing their job and they're trying their very best. And I think that that needs to be said. Like, we are
yeah,
not setting up this company in opposition to the global oil and gas business. They have spent 120 years building out a system that has these terrible byproducts, including, climate change, which is real. And, obviously, some of the byproducts are plastics that then can't be disposed of safely. And now we're facing a global glut of microplastics. They're in our brains, they're in our lungs. So I think what really needs to happen is, as the world turns away from using single use plastics, we need to start thinking about how to clean it up and how to do it safely. And without a doubt, I mean, we're going to need the industry to work on this together. It can't be done in isolation. This is a global problem. People love single use plastic. And, as much as it's easy and makes it great to point fingers at companies like Exxon or Shell or whatever, they are going to have to be part of the solution too. And I think a lot of the people there, although, things have changed recently, but things always change. And I think a lot of
yeah.
people really want to see a solution to this. So for
I think you're
now,
right,
yeah.
and you bring about a really good point, which is odd for an experienced journalist and film director to bring out a good point. But he said facetiously, the you said it can't be done in isolation, but it can't be done in opposition either, and that's a lot of what happens, right? And is this opposition, and some view you as, obviously, because you said it, that so you have to be speaking to somebody thinks that you're in opposition to the oil and gas industry, right? they
Well, I
feel it they
actually
feel
don't
it's a
think
threat.
so. Like, I
No.
think, no, I think when it comes to Scarabtech, we're in a position where we have a small solution for
Yeah.
a highly distributed problem. And so our solution can be highly distributed. We're looking at unleashing this technology across 800 sites in the next 5 years. And pretty much all of those sites are places where plastic is a big problem and there's a serious lack of access to energy. Like in South Africa, for instance, we pay almost double what you all pay in the United States for fuel. So
Well,
imagine,
there's a whole bunch of people who just choked on their coffee and
yeah,
and eggs.
double. Yeah, we pay
Yeah.
double here. So there's a serious problem of affordable access to energy. Plus, although we do recycle a very large amount of plastic in this country, it's about 11% compared to about 9% in the US.
Yeah.
Actually, most of it's ending up in the landfill or in the rivers. And our solution is really about doing something about that plastic. So we're not really
Yeah.
in opposition to anyone. We're looking at this as a massive opportunity for communities to engage over their own energy choices and how they want their own communities to look. No one wants to see plastic everywhere. In America, we don't generally see plastic on the street. Whereas
Unless it
here,
rains real hard.
unless it rains really hard, and there are some communities that are facing that. But
Yeah.
here or in Southeast Asia, a lot of islands that we've looked at and done research on, there's about 5,000 islands where the plastic is literally the highest point on the island.
Which is unbelievable for people here to even think of. I can't tell you how many people I speak to in the United States that think that it's not an issue. A even in the U.S., they think, "Oh, we've got it handled in the U.S." Well, no, that's because our plastic is all over the the islands in the Southeast Pacific, or
Well, and
Southwest
I
Pacific,
think
I
just
guess it
to
would
unpack
be.
what you just said, I think a lot of people would be very surprised that when they pay for a recycler to take away their plastic in many US states, it was being shipped to Cambodia, to Laos, to Vietnam, and
Right.
China. And then it was
Yeah.
being processed on the riverside where the high value plastics were removed. And the low value plastics would get washed out with these huge monsoon rains that come through every year. And
Right. And
so that
wasn't
is
that
why
process part of the
somebody's
National Sword? Wasn't that like the reason for National Sword or whatever it was, where they ended bringing the plastics in?
that is correct. Although not all the countries have done that. There are still a few who are doing it. So there are a few countries in Southeast Asia that are still importing US recycled plastic, but most of them have quit over the last 5 years. However, there's still a major problem with people's, US recycled plastic ending up in the ocean. And I think that people need to sort of face up to that and say, okay, well, what can we do that's better? And, we don't have all the answers to plastic at Scarabtech. We have one answer. But in the long run, we're all going to have to face the fact that single use plastic probably needs to be phased out in some manner.
It
Either,
probably does, I would
yeah,
say.
yeah, either we're going to have to go to a fully recyclable plastic that you can actually just reuse, which they do in Germany, for instance. They have these big, heavy plastic bottles like this one, like a very thick one, and then you take it back and it's worth 25 US cents. So then it is reused until it's not useful anymore, and then it is recycled 100%. So I think we're
And
going to have
that's part of the problem right there too, right? Is many of the recycling processes, or repurposing, I would say, of this of the recycling, to me, is you turn it back into a bottle, kind of thing.
hmm,
But I mean, so recycling, whatever you want to call it, you take a bottle, you turn it into clothing or a shoe or
hmm,
something like that, right? Part of the problem is we're taking, like, what I would call pristine first use plastics and turning them into something that then now you're limiting what it can then be recycled to into after that, right? Isn't that part of the issue as well?
It is
Like
sometimes like polyethylene tetrachlorate is a very PET, plastic number one. Plastics have
right.
numbers, and plastic number one is the most recycled plastic and the most high valued recycled plastic in the world, and it can be worth 10 times more than its brother HDPE, which is plastic number two.
Right.
So, these are the numbers why somebody would be able to take American plastic in Cambodia and actually do a profitable recycling business with it. But then they would just leave the HDPE to float out to the ocean. And it's worth noting that our machine does not process PET, plastic number one, for two
Hmm.
reasons. One, it doesn't lend itself very easily to the pyrolytic process. So it has to be done at such a high temperature that the energy necessary isn't worth it. But then the second reason is because it's got such a high resale value on the recycled plastic market that you would ruin that market if you suddenly decided just to turn it into fuel. It's also worth noting that at least here in South Africa, where I'm working at one of our pilot sites right now, which is why I'm here, is that the plastic to be recycled, the PET, is worth more than the same amount of gasoline. So you couldn't
Oh.
even turn it into fuel and sell it at a profit. So that all works in our favor because what we're doing is we're actually taking the plastic that is ending up in the ocean that no one wants. This is thin films like low density polyethylene and heavier plastics like high density polyethylene and polypropylene. All of these are sort of food grade plastics, so we can do post consumer waste and we can also do
Mhm.
post industrial waste because a lot of heavy industry uses those plastics too. And all of that is either ending up in the landfill or being dumped somewhere. And that is sort of like our total addressable market is 51% of the plastic created on Earth. And that's what we're
Wow.
focusing on.
So why is it that those particular plastics, eh, the non PETs, the HDs, the linear low PEs, why are they not as popular to recycle?
Oh, they just
Why are
aren't
they?
worth
Why don't
enough
they?
money because they
But
can be
why? But
made
why
so
is
much
that?
cheaper as because if you think about it like this, to recycle something, you have to move it from where it is a piece of
Sure,
rubbish or trash
sure,
to where you can recycle it. And moving
yeah,
plastic around is extremely expensive. So if you
right,
think about it like this, a huge 18-wheeler truck full of plastic, and in the US, we've done the numbers for the state of Colorado, where I come from.
yeah,
And if you drive more than 50 miles away with a load of low density polyethylene, you're using more fuel than the entire load is worth. So even if you're going
yeah,
to turn it into petroleum product like we are, you are
yeah.
still going to have to do it at a distance of less than 50 miles or 100 miles away. And that generally holds true in most jurisdictions that we've looked at. And we've looked at a lot
Gotcha.
of them. Because
But
right now we're working in Bangladesh. We have one of our machines around the world with a French expedition called Plastic Odyssey. We have another machine working on the Great Barrier Reef that's mobile with our group called Plastics Pirate. We're building a second machine in Australia right now that will conform to Australian Bureau of Standards so we can sell these all over the world. And then we're working here in Johannesburg, South Africa with one of our pilot partners, and we're processing post-industrial plastic here.
wow, okay. Now, I get. So who in particular exactly is using this machine? How does one
Right.
and
So,
who wants to get a
yeah.
hold of it and how do they do it?
Well, if we were selling machines, we could probably sell a whole bunch out of the door tomorrow. But,
Okay.
at the moment, we're actually we've been prototyping and then putting our pilots out and running
Okay,
them
so
in real world. And
you're still in pilot phase
we
doing
have
this.
been, and now we're transitioning from the
Okay.
pilot phase into an operator license model. So if you think about it like the way that Nashua copiers in the US are run. So if you have a big office building, you don't want to run a huge copy machine because that's not your core competency. So instead you pay Nashua to use it and operate that machine, and then they just make sure it always works. So
I
that's
got
the
you.
kind of system that we're building to develop it out into our sort of distributed model across the planet for the next 5 years, we hope to have 800 in operation.
Gotcha. That's interesting. So, where did you how did you say, you know what, this is what I'm going to solve? You went through all your investigative journalism and everything, and you're still in it. So you've seen many different problems. I'm sure there's all kinds of different things that you could have said, hey, we need to solve this problem, because
Sure.
there are millions of problems to solve.
Sure,
There's no
Mike.
shortage of problems to attack, right?
There's no
They're just
shortage of problems right now. And
no,
I
they're
don't see any of them really getting tackled. But let's just say, on a very positive note, to put the silver on the lining, is that I've seen a lot of projects out there. For a while, I was working with a group called Global Post out of Boston. And one of my jobs was for 2 years to go around the world and look into different positive solutions to climate problems, environmental problems, things that people were doing that were really innovative. So I got a chance to go around the world on the Turanor, the first around the world solar sailing ship through the Mediterranean and the old cities of like Malta. It was really amazing. And it was an
how
incredible sort
cool.
of like 2 year odyssey of solution based, stories, which,
Wow.
that sort of teed me up to see what was really possible and how many people really are working so hard to tackle these sort of intractable problems. And I've been at this long enough to see that people do sometimes win. So I think that needs to be noted. Like here in South Africa, we have the largest renewable energy build out per capita for energy consumption on Earth, and it's all built around solar and wind power. And we went from having rolling blackouts for 8 years to now we have an actual nearly a gigawatt of oversupply to settle the grid. We're still, backing that up with a bunch of coal-fired power stations, but over
Sure.
time, those will also come offline. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that I was keyed up to start looking for solutions. And then one of my friends had me over at his place. And it's worth noting that there are 5 founders in Scarabtech.
Oh, okay.
And one of them is an incredible inventor named Pierre Pretorius from here in South Africa. And he although our technology is originating, in our own heads, and we all built it. So this is an American company that has a subsidiary here. He actually had built one of these machines on an American plan that had once been seen at Burning Man, and they had put it on crowdsourcing, like an open source
Yeah.
design. And then he'd seen it. He built one, and it was working at his house. And once it was working at his house, I was up there visiting him, and I couldn't believe it. And what's really interesting is we then decided that we would make one of his machines and put it on wheels. And we would take it to the largest Burning Man event outside of Burning Man in the world, which is called Africa Burn, and it's here in the Karoo Desert. And we built it. He is an industrial designer, and he's also a set designer. And he is the man who built the sets for that movie District 9 with
Oh
the
wow.
aliens
Okay.
that come down. And so
Yeah,
those
yeah,
were
yeah.
those were all sets. Those were not that was not CGI. And he built almost all of those sets and was the head set designer for that movie. So he built a massive bug called a dung beetle that is a symbol of pushing, something no one wants, which in this case is waste plastic, but in the dung beetle's case is poop.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
but this metaphor, I made a huge ball that was the shape of the earth, and we put his machine inside, and then we ran like a party and an environmental education stage at Africa Burn in 2018 for the very first time. And we ran it off of the gas from pyrolysis from his machine.
How
And it
cool.
was such an interesting crew to work with. We all decided that we would try to make it work as a business because it was something that we could do. And as we've seen in the rest of the world, this country is filling up with plastic at a rapid rate. I mean, in the US alone, virtually every state and every municipality is struggling with the plastic load into the landfills now that we're not exporting plastic. So this is a global problem, and we
It's
thought
a
it would make a
huge.
fantastic solution. And just to tie the story up together, because I know you do love a good story,
I
is
do love a good
is
story.
is that the woman who open sourced her design on the Burning Man sort of platform
Yeah.
back in the day. And I think she did it in 2007 or 8. She can correct me if I'm wrong. Dr. Julia Hasty. She actually started working with us, and she became like our sort of proof of concept. You know, the buck stops with her. She's a professor of gasification, and she is also a genius, of course. And it was actually her original design. Then she reached out to us because she saw what we had done, and we had changed it so dramatically that it's actually completely different now. And
Yeah.
then once we had a working machine that we could actually show, we actually hired a new engineer, and he went and recreated the entire machine during COVID into what it is today, which is one of the most efficient, high capacity, plonkable solutions to plastic waste that's on Earth today.
Wow. Okay. That's a fantastic
So it
story,
was
as a
really
matter of
teamwork.
fact.
It was teamwork that
Yeah.
really made
Yeah.
that
It's
dream
not
work.
you
Yeah.
running around trying to get people to do it.
I am not the
That's
one.
you're not the one. You're one of the ones, but
Mm-hmm.
not the one. That is
I am not
that's a
the
heck
only
of a
one.
good story. So why the scale? Why not the large scale? I mean,
Right.
I get it because there's these places. There's a social thing to it, et cetera. Is that the whole reason
Well,
to help out these communities? Which isn't a bad reason. I'm not saying that's not a bad
no,
reason,
no.
but it
I
seems
think
to me that huge refineries in the U.S. would be a fantastic idea for something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a couple issues with that. One is that if you make a really big plant, then you again have the problem of what we call the plastic island effect. Even though these are not islands, let's say Glenwood Springs, Colorado is 250 miles away from the nearest big plant. You're still not going to make enough fuel from the plastic by trucking it there to justify the use of the fuel to truck it there. You see what I'm
Hmm.
saying? So a distributed
Yeah.
model is the only kind of model that can work financially. If you just want to pay to get rid of plastic, that'll work fine. But if you
Yeah.
want it to actually pay for itself and make money for communities, particularly cash-strapped municipalities and towns around America that are facing this problem, then you're going to have to do it in town. You can't
Yeah.
make a big plant because you can't take enough plastic from far enough away to it's too far away to drive it there. So
Yeah.
that's
No, I
one
get it.
problem. But
I
the other
get it.
problem is less prosaic and simply more mechanical. These machines work a lot better when they're small.
Okay. I
I think
got you.
that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, you probably yeah.
But I
Yeah,
also
please don't. Otherwise, I'll have to edit, and I don't
yeah,
like to edit.
no, you don't want to edit. So I can add a couple things though, in that we do have like an overarching belief at our company that we can do better for these communities that are impacted by plastic, because these communities need energy just like the rest of us. And one of the ideas that we're working on is when we build these machines and plonk them, because they can be delivered again in a container, and we put it where plastic is a problem, we foresee the fact that we are going to be able to get rid of those people's plastic problem in a few years. But
Oh,
when
that's
we're doing
fantastic.
it, because we also have solutions that we can lock into this, like generator systems that use our fuel directly out of the system. So then what you're doing is actually creating electricity. And a lot of the people who are using fuel on islands are using generators already. So
Yeah,
what we're doing is supplying a microgrid, an electrical solution that then can then be replaced with just a lock and run solar system that you can just, buy today online. And that is
yeah,
what we're thinking, because it's the distribution capacity of these microgrids built around our machines that can then just be replaced with solar as soon as the plastic problem is cleaned up.
gotcha. Has now? I actually had a rather high up executive at a new recycling technology company backed by a rather large CPG company tell me that there's no recycling issue in the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islands. That they're recycling everything and everything is just honky dory. What do you say to that?
Oh, I'd love to visit that island and learn what they're doing. I mean, I'm not one to just poo poo anyone's thoughts. I mean, it's possible that they have set up something like that. But we know
Yeah,
from experience, particularly, we were working on a project proposal in Puerto Rico. And in fact, the ship, one of our machines, is on this Plastic Odyssey ship going around the world, stopped in
yeah,
Puerto Rico. And at least the island of Puerto Rico has an incredibly large plastic problem that's not being addressed right now. And is
right.
really fouling the beaches and the country, and they're really struggling to face up to this issue, like most
It
islands.
is most of it is it washing up, or is it just they don't have the capacity to handle what they are consuming on those islands?
I think it's a combined problem. So
Yeah,
from what we've seen, and I've been in Bangladesh to help set up our machine last March, so it's been there a
yeah,
year. So it's on the Padma River. So if you think about it like this, the Padma River is one of the major rivers to contribute to the ocean plastic problem. And
mm,
what happens is a lot of the plastic processing areas, and when I say plastic processing, I'm talking about people go and dump plastic in a pile next to the river. And then other people take the high value plastic out of there and
yeah,
sell
and
it.
leave the rest to wash
And
away.
then they leave the rest, and then the monsoon comes down and it floods that river with a massive, massive flood bore,
So
like a huge
it's the
wave that gets pushed down from the Himalaya.
if we weren't exporting, or if other companies, not just the U.S., but if they weren't importing those plastics to then try and create an industry to make money and economic and would they wouldn't produce the
They
plastic
most of the
themselves?
plastic I just discussed with you with Bangladesh, it is not a plastic importing country for certain.
Okay,
That's all
it's
their own
from their
plastic.
own. It's from their own consumption and stuff like. That's what I was getting to. Is
Yeah.
it the idea of the global South being like the dumping grounds of plastics anymore? Is it just their own consumption?
I think it's a combined problem. And certainly if you think about it like this, this so these plastics are being made all over the world, but a lot
Right.
of them are being made in the United States because plastic is very easy to make from natural gas. So a lot of plastic isn't made from oil; it's actually made from oil. It's made from gas. From
Oh, is that right? I did not know that. Wow.
So yeah, we make a
I
lot of plastic in the U.S. and then we export it as these little things called nurdles. They're
Yep.
like little beads, and then those get sent around the world. For instance, Bangladesh imports a lot of its plastic from the U.S. and other places, but they come in the form of these little beads, and then those get turned into plastic bags that everybody uses for their shopping, and then those
Yeah.
get chucked on the riverside, and those are not recycled. But our machine can actually process those thin film plastics,
Yeah.
unlike
When you
most recycling systems.
yeah when you talk about that, it seems to me like you've got and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like you've got a situation where your machine can process the crap plastic, the plastics nobody wants, the worthless. Or is it because they're contaminated? I mean, it could, like, you don't have to have straight LLDPE at a specific density, etc., and specific. You can mix that with HD, etc., and run it through your machine, or do you have to sort the different polymers before your machine can accept it?
So our
Or are
machine.
you allowed to say?
Oh no, 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 no! I'm just trying to think of a way to answer it in a nutshell. It works
Well,
best.
your layman throws a bunch. They see a bunch of plastics. They take the bottles out. There's a bunch of other crap that's left there
Yeah.
that's not the exact same plastics. Can all that just be picked up and thrown into your machine?
Yes, but then you're left with a much lower grade fuel. If you clean it and you then dry it, then it's going to make a fuel that you can use directly in either a diesel or a petrol generator. Or like for instance, I use mine in my Toyota Land Cruiser, which is a diesel. So, you can actually use this fuel directly from the machine if you're a little bit selective about what you put in it. And that could be as simple as for the next 2 weeks, we're just going to put plastic bags. And then we're going to take all of the shavings that came out of a tooling company that we're working with here, where they were drilling plastic, and they have, 7 or 8 tons of that every month. And then we'll process all of that. And that will make a slightly different grade of fuel. and it will be useful
Yeah.
for other things. So we work very closely with petroleum engineers who test this fuel. And this is one of the joys of doing these pilots all over the world, is that we're getting data from lots of different plastic collection hotspots. So right now
Yeah.
we're trying to arrange for a really exciting opportunity to help get rid of ghost nets in the Pacific with the
Oh,
folks
fantastic.
who are facing that terrible travesty off the Great Barrier Reef. And these are nets that are floating in the ocean that have been cut loose from huge trawlers. Some of these nets are 2 or 3, 4 miles long. And then
Hmm.
these nets are just floating in the ocean and they're catching fish indiscriminately. And some of them are ending up wrapped around the Great Barrier Reef. So our,
Yeah.
our, our partners on the Great Barrier Reef are putting together a partnership to pull these ghost nets into a place where they can have the sort of organic debris, shame, and all the fish that died in them and stuff cleaned off them and then process them through our machine. Because a lot of these nets are either polyethylene or polypropylene. And that works great in our machine. Like I said, we can take pretty much 51% of all the plastic made in the world.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those are nylons too, aren't they?
Yeah, which is a type of ethylene.
It,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a whatever PA something or other. I don't know. You probably know the formula. I don't. I've known it a couple times, but yeah, no. The nets are very. That's a very interesting thing because it's huge. That is a huge problem. People don't understand that these nets are, like you said, you described, so massive. They're not like these seining nets that people throw out to catch some, you know.
No, these are big industrial fishing nets off of ships that have 100 workers on them. These are
Yeah.
big. So what I guess I was digressing there, and I kind of missed my opportunity to answer your very good question. But I would say that we can take all sorts of plastic, and
Yeah.
if you think about it like this, our system works very well if it's partnered with a recycler, because recyclers have two major problems facing them. They don't know what to do with the plastic they can't recycle, and the
Right.
energy input to run their recycling center is extremely expensive, especially in places that don't have reliable electricity.
Right.
So you can imagine, a recycler is sitting there with these two combined problems, and we can help them fix both. And that's exciting. I mean, you guys have a recycling system that you sell, that is this sort of, cleaner system and recycles the water as well. And that's the kind of partnership, and that's one of the reasons why we're friends. That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
partnership that we will need to make these solutions work the best.
Well,
But
and it's also getting it to the source, right? And I mean, and that's what our machines do as well. They're smaller, they're micro scale, and if you think about it, you've got a micro scale refinery, really, plastics refining it into, and so because, like you said, shipping it 500 miles doesn't make any sense. That's why nobody's using these plastics. It's so expensive logistically to do it. So if you densify it and process it at location or as close to the source, then you can economically do it. You can turn a viable business out of it, that's the goal, right? Because human altruism waxes and wanes with the wind and the moon.
no, these things have to make money and they have to work for the communities. Also, if because we're working on an operator model, we want the
Yeah.
operator to be able to pay one of these off in a couple of years. And then we want that money to be going back to the operator to keep people employed. This machine needs somebody to run it with like sort of the the sort of education level of a diesel mechanic, but we train those people. So like the people in Bangladesh, they all flew out here. We trained all their operators. We give them a stamp of approval. We call them on the phone all the time. We often do sort of online tutorials if we've got a new solution to the machine. And I think this is the benefit of doing this, is that you're upskilling communities. You're solving their plastic pollution problem. You're solving the issue around having people employed. So you're giving people jobs, which are very hard to come by in some of these communities. And
Yeah.
you're also giving them skills that work all over the world. I mean, one of the guys that works with us in Bangladesh, we'd love to hire him as we roll out these 800 plants over the region, 4 regions in 5 years. as we roll these plants out, we're going to need him to be a trainer. So we're training trainers and upskilling communities so that they can be the solutions for their own communities in the future too.
That is absolutely amazing, and it's awesome. It's I applaud everything that you guys are doing. You now, when I spoke to you, maybe not last, but a couple just not too long ago, Bangladesh was coming online, and you had said it took them like just a few days to set it up, and they were running, right?
Yeah, I actually went there for about 10 days. And in those 10 days, we were able to get their, I think we got their machine running in about 3 or 4. And, when the box arrived in Bangladesh, it was knocked on its side. And we were super
Yeah.
happy that the machine was absolutely robust enough to handle that. And then we were able to, the nice thing about our machines is that they're serviceable in the field. And that's really important because what you don't want, and what a lot of pyrolysis systems get wrong, especially the really big ones, is if something goes wrong with it, the whole plant shuts down. Whereas,
Oh,
our system right now, where we're building a pilot plant here in Johannesburg that will have 2 of our machines sort of at the heart of it. And
okay.
so we will also have a third machine so that we expect this to have as little downtime as possible. Because what we are doing is proving out the sort of financial sort of support structure that will work in pretty much any environment, and it will work with post-consumer waste as well as post-industrial waste, because companies have a problem too, and I think that needs to be
Oh,
mentioned.
big. Yeah. Post
Yeah,
industrial is huge. Yeah.
it's huge. If you think about these huge farms in the United States, particularly in the Georgia area, we were looking at a lot of farms are using polypropylene sheeting, and they have to replace that sheeting every year. And it's multiple hundreds of tons, sometimes thousands from one
Yeah.
farm. And there's no solution to this sheeting at the moment. So for us to be able to offer a farmer a solution for sheeting and work with local government and make sure that there's a refinery that can take that fuel that we're creating, or we can sell it straight into the market through we've got these special I don't know if the infrastructure um, Build Out Act, the IRA in the United States. Excuse me, I forgot the
Yes.
acronym.
Yeah. It's the IRA. Yeah,
It's the IRA,
inflation
Inflation Reduction Act.
It's not that. It's not that IRA.
Yeah, but it is actually the Inflation Reduction Act. It's just
It is,
it's
but
the
it's
Infrastructure Act.
the other IRA from our childhood that we remember is
It
not,
is. It is. It's not that one.
It's not that one.
Yeah, and that is still in place in many places, and a lot of that is being done in states that have some looser regulation, and some of those regulations directly support pyrolysis. 22 states now. So when states want to do this, they're probably going to have to look at companies like ourselves, because we have, a robust, not a distributed system for all the reasons that we just talked about. This system is appropriate for communities that are facing a glut of plastic, but it's also appropriate for businesses that are facing a glut of plastic.
So okay, so you mentioned a couple of things that we didn't discuss before, but I guess it's a given to people who understand the process more than I do. But you're not taking this fuel putting it into a tank and then pouring it into your
I am
land crews.
absolutely taking the fuel and pouring it directly hot, still out of the machine, into my truck.
You are.
I am absolutely.
Are the authorities looking for you at this point, or are you okay?
Well, this is piloting. So if I'm the only one doing it,
it's in the name of research. It's all in the name of research, so it's good.
Yeah. So we have.
No, but you're not. You couldn't do it like in a farm. If you put this in a farm, because you're talking about poly mulch and hoop house film and silage and all that stuff, right? And you're
not silage, silage film, but not the silage itself.
Oh yeah. The silage, the film, yeah. But but the farm couldn't just do this and then start running their tractors off of that.
No, you'd have to get a special dispensation from the government to do that. Yeah. And so these are, when I talk about how this can work with partnerships, these are the partnerships that I'm involved in building. So, for instance, right here, we have a group in South Africa that's connected to the government that has like a polyfuel market that you can tap into, and you can sell your stuff into the market if you make less than 50,000 liters a month. So that's 50 tons a month. So our pilot system here is going to be hitting just below that threshold, and we are compliant with all of those regulations, and we will continue to be so. But also,
Wow.
those people who are involved in creating regulations here in South Africa are looking to us to help guide them as they build out new regulations to cover this nascent industry.
Which is important because, in a lot of cases, those regulations are made by people who are influenced by people who don't want those new disruptive technologies, right? Or want them but have no idea what they do and how they can create these unintentional slippery slopes and roadblocks
Sure.
through
And I
through
think
different.
that when I said at the beginning of this and why we're not in opposition to anyone with this
Yeah.
technology is it's an appropriate technology to get rid of a problem everyone agrees we have. No one
Oh,
is
and I
going to
would think
tell
those
you.
people that people might think are your enemies, like your Exxons and so on and so forth, I happen to know people at those places that are working on these issues.
Yeah, they care deeply. And
A
I think
hundred percent.
yeah, and I
Hundred
think that
percent.
one of the things about it is that this is an everyone on board problem.
Yeah.
No one wants their baby to be inhaling microplastics every time there's a thunderstorm. That is happening.
Yeah.
This is not good stuff that you do not want in your ecosystem, in your drinking water, in your air. So I think when we look at this as a solution that is here to clean up the mess, then everyone is on board. Some jurisdictions we're going to work directly with the petroleum board in Southeast Asia and sell the fuel directly through them, and then have them do some kind of deal to give it to the community for a reduced amount than what it costs today.
Yeah.
I'm just thumb sucking the kind of deal I'm talking about here,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
our fuel is also much cleaner than regular fuel.
I was
And
going there. I wanted to talk about that too, because if it's that, so why do you have to, why does the government in any country control what fuel you burn? If, especially if you look at, like, well, I guess is it money over environment, especially when you look at a place like certain states in the United States that are very much, the oil, like Texas, right? I mean, Texas, you're not allowed to. They try to make it hard for you to even invest in a sustainable business or anybody who has negative connotations towards the petroleum industry or something like that.
well, I
What is
would
the
agree with you to
motivation?
a point, Michael, but if we're just going to use Texas, which I know a whole bunch about, because crazy enough, Texas has the largest single build out of renewable energy in the United States. And I think
Which
it's
is
second
insane, right?
behind
But then you
China.
read,
So,
they do. I mean, they have a huge build out of renewable, and there's people in there that are doing great work, even Exxon, et cetera, that's doing incredibly good work
yeah,
in
yeah,
Texas.
yeah.
Yet the investment of public funds is like it's not legal to use that in some of
Yeah,
these
I think
technologies.
that a value will find a way, right?
Yeah,
Over
yeah,
time, that will change. But
yeah.
what will change it is because there has been so much investment by renewable energy companies
Gotcha.
in Texas. But to answer your point, if you have a small oil well on your farm in Texas,
Yeah,
and a lot of people do, because I come from
yeah,
rural Western Colorado, I'm from Garfield County. It was one of the places that we rolled out fracking in the United States. Love it or hate it, it's here. And we were
yeah,
one of the communities that faced it. So I
yeah.
grew up around, people who wanted to find oil on their farms. And it was
Right.
only when fracking came around in about 2005 with the Bush Cheney Energy Act that then allowed fracking on land to
Right.
not be governed by certain environmental acts like Community Right to Know Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Clean Water Act. It
Yeah.
was only until that bill was passed by Congress and signed into law by George Bush II that we were able to unroll fracking across the United States. And that meant that a lot of people had small scale wells that were producing. So, like the state of Colorado, for instance, requires local refineries, like in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is the nearest big refinery to where I grew up. They have to buy fuels that are created by small scale producers. So that
Oh,
is actually, if you think about it, this could and has been destructive. And we can argue about the environmental destruction about fracking, but I think everyone agrees you don't want to live next to a well. It's just not that fun and
yeah.
it's dangerous. However, the fact that there are these opportunities means that a small, you know, like Rifle, Colorado, which has a problem with its landfill filling up with plastic right now, could invest in one of our machines and ship that fuel directly to Grand Junction. They have to buy it on the open market, or it's roughly. But you see what I'm saying? So there are
So the
opportunities.
legislation to sell the fuel from it is already there,
It's already there.
unbeknownst.
It's already there.
Yeah, gotcha.
Mm.
So that makes sense. There's similar laws like in Texas and in other
Yeah,
areas
in
like that.
Texas,
Okay,
very similar.
that's
Pennsylvania,
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I guess my my question is this: your fuel is cleaner, right? So is your fuel cleaner like straight out of it and throw it in a tractor if you get
Much
if you
cleaner.
get okay, so why does it then have to go to a refinery? Is it because
Well,
of engine warranties and stuff like that,
engine
or
warranties, people, you don't want to put this in your, 22 million dollar John Deere tractor and have one of your injectors clogged and then the AI loses its mind. You got to have some
yeah,
guarantees and stuff. Now,
yeah,
if you want to use this in a two-stroke engine, now, I'm for all your viewers out there and listeners, a two-stroke engine is essentially a very dirty engine that runs a mixture of gasoline mixed with oil. So you
yeah?
blend the two together and think of like a scrambler bike or
An
an
old
outboard.
weed whacker, or a Husqvarna 400
Yeah,
back in the
yeah,
day.
and
Yeah,
so so those engines work great with this fuel.
yeah,
And you add the same sort of oil because that's part of how the engine works. A lot of those engines are at work today in Southeast Asia. So it would be a way to clean up that fuel. Also, it's important to note, like certainly in this market here and in many other markets where fuel is not refined in the country, the exploration, the drilling for it, then all of the production, the removal of the oil onto a ship, and then shipping that oil across the planet to a refinery to be refined and then shipped back to you. It For every liter, let's you're American, so we'll speak in gallons. I'm also
no, we
American.
understand liters. It's the
So
only thing we understand in the U.S.
okay, so if you take 1 gallon of fuel in South Africa today, because we don't have any refining capability, it takes about 1.5 to almost 2.5 gallons of fuel to get that gallon of fuel to you. That's
Wow.
called the well to tank transport cost.
Yeah,
And that
that's
cost
ridiculous.
is levied in fuel burned into the atmosphere. So if you think about it like this, for every gallon of fuel you would get from our machine and use it on site. So let's say you just take it, and this is very common because even here, if you want to address the generator market in South Africa, the generator market actually has a lot less rules. So people can use our fuel in their generators with like a simple letter saying it's allowed. So and if you and like I mentioned, we've had some electricity supply problems in this country, so
Yeah,
everybody's got generators. So
sure.
by using our fuel in the generator, you're basically stopping around 2 entire gallons of fuel from being burnt in the atmosphere every time you burn one. So that is not including the fact that our fuel is so much cleaner than regular
So the
diesel.
fuel itself is cleaner, but
The
the
well to tank
carbon footprint of the
transport footprint.
logistics
Yeah.
supply chain is what you're talking about. It's a
Yeah.
supply chain footprint that you're taking
Yeah.
out of this.
Yeah.
So is that real math, or is that
That's real math. And like if you look at Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a big think tank out of Colorado, they
yeah?
produced an amazing report last June in 2024 that outlined that just the transport of fossil fuels is between 52 and 60% of the entire global shipping traffic. Just the transport of fossil fuels.
It's
And all of those
ridiculous.
ships are burning fossil fuels, right? So that's the whole
Yeah.
like full amount. So you're
Well, some of
looking
the funny things is now you see these the sails and the spinning sails. I forget what they're called. The old technology of the spinning tube.
the spinnaker, yeah.
Yeah, on tanker ships.
Yeah.
You're starting to see this. So now we're using wind energy to move petrol
Yeah,
across.
exactly, because it's so much more efficient. And the other
Yeah.
part of it is that, and I think this is notable, you know, if we're like we're going to put 800 of these machines. So you asked why make them small? But if you think about it like this is one massive distributed refinery.
Yeah. Yeah.
800 of these machines, and I'm just going to give you some of the numbers for your listeners to really
All right.
wrap their heads around. So in 5 years, with 800 of these out there, it's 500 million liters of carbon neutral fuel produced. That's not including like the gas that comes out, because we have 65 million kilos of gas that would be produced. I don't have that number in imperial numbers, but it creates around 50,000 new jobs across the entire value chain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, gas, you mean like gases?
Yeah, so we produce gas and we use it. So right now we're going to be at our pilot like showcase plant here in Johannesburg. We will be like compressing the gas and sending it off to somebody who has a gas distribution license. So that will be the gas as well. So we produce liquid fuel, we produce gas.
What's the gas that's produced? Is it
It's
methane?
mostly methane and hydrogen. And right now, everybody's hyping about hydrogen, but imagine we can supply the hydrogen market with plastic-derived gas that reduces the plastic pollution problem and makes it, reduces the carbon dioxide footprint of fossil fuels. It's real.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and you can easily split methane and hydrogen. So those are the two main components of our gas. And then, the amount of plastic, this is just the first 5 years with 800 of these plants, is almost 500 million kilograms of plastic diverted from landfill, ocean, rivers. And if you think about it, the global total addressable market for plastic is around 5 billion. So, we're right on the edge of being able to actually make a small dent in the global plastic problem.
You said how many kilograms?
About half a billion. Yeah.
Okay, so 2.2 pounds per kilogram.
That's correct. Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
So that's about a billion pounds. So
yeah.
But if you think about it, that's only if divide it by 2,000 and you get the tons out of it, right? So it's still just a little tiny drop in the bucket of the plastic that's a problem. But
and that needs to be said, because here's the thing is one of the things that aggravates me a bit is, or not aggravates me, it's one of the purposes of the program, besides just educating and getting people to understand that certain things are real and you can argue them or not, but they're real. Climate change, global warming, etc. And even if you want to say, look, I don't believe in global warming or whatever. Okay, great. That's fine. Okay. It's not great, but okay, fine. Do you still want to keep dumping, NOx and methane and stuff like that, and plastics all over is that good still, even if you don't believe in it? I mean, it's still not a good thing to do, to keep poisoning the environment and our kids, et cetera. So, make a difference. But some people then who are worried about it and don't do anything about it, I'm trying to inspire them as well by showing them there's blue oceans of opportunity as far as business and jobs and economic growth and uplifting communities in sustainability that is just positive all the way around, no matter how you look at it, right? Extraction of wealth just for the sake of extraction of wealth is not why we're here. So
and also, there's money to be made here. There is
money to be made here, but as big a solution as you've got and as impressive as those numbers are that you're doing, nobody should go, oh, well, cool, I don't need to worry about it, Jeff's got it.
No,
Jeff's
that
got
is absolutely
this much.
Not true.
As successful as it is, Jeff's got this much, right?
I think it's worth noting that, around 49% of all the plastic in the world actually makes it to landfill. About 19% of it's incinerated. About 9% is actually recycled. And 22% of all the plastic made is mismanaged.
Yeah.
So that means it ends up in the rivers or the ocean.
Well, it depends on your definition of mismanaged. Most landfills I'd call mismanaged anyways. It's just,
true.
You may be managing it, but it ain't the best way to manage it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think
You know?
just on your point, I think this is really important for your listeners too. And for anyone who's interested in these types of solutions, this is not the end all be all. We do
Uh-uh.
not have a corner on the best solution out there. We have one solution that is distributed, it is profitable, market forces will drive its rapid deployment, it's decentralized, it minimizes the transport of plastic, and it is carbon neutral because it cannot make climate change worse than using regular fossil fuels. So that's very important for a lot of people. And also, despite what some countries have backpedaled on their climate targets, a lot of countries haven't. And companies have these kinds of very front and center policies globally, whether they're in Japan or Germany, Australia, China, even. So it's really important to know that just because some people have decided that the climate change doesn't need to be addressed doesn't mean that there's a vast market out there of industry that's desperate to meet their climate targets because they know that this is a problem. And whether or not you believe in it, it is still a problem. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of people to come along on this journey with us. And, one of the things that we really like to think of is, again, partnerships and working together to fix these major problems. And we really do hope, people will come along on this journey with us, whether they just follow us on social media at like LinkedIn or Facebook, where we're on.
What are they? Where are they following you
Yeah,
at?
we're on Scarabtech. So Scarabtech on LinkedIn, Scarabtech on, so it's SCARABTECH. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we'll be out there telling everybody about what we're doing and, explaining some of the pitfalls and talking a lot about recycling. We love to share information.
Yeah.
Recently, I just shared
Following your journey as you
they're
get the
following our
800 out
journey.
there.
And, we found that unfortunately, a lot of people in the developing world are now using plastic to cook on directly. Um, yeah, there's a Nature article that came out about a month ago. You'll see
Oh,
it on
they're
our
burning
social
it and
media.
then cooking on top of the
They're
burning
putting the
plastic.
plastic into their fire pit because it's cheaper than going to look for firewood. And then those dioxins and terrible compounds are then entering their homes and into the sky around them. And it's happening here in this city where I live in Johannesburg. So yeah, and I don't live here all the time, but it's where I'm working right now for the next year while we set up this showcase plant. So we'll have a lot of fun engagement opportunities for people on social media, and also, we love to hear from people who are facing these problems and coming up with solutions themselves. So
How do they do it? Just DM you guys
yeah,
through
they can DM
LinkedIn
us,
and
add
Facebook, and
us. Yeah,
you've got contact us on scarabtech.com as
we
well,
do.
right?
And
Can
we've
they?
got the hot links working on scarabtech.com, and we'll be updating our website to make sure that that's still front and center. And
You
yeah,
know
I
you're
think,
there if you see the dung beetle.
yeah, there's the beetle. Yeah,
I love the
the
beetle, and
original beetle.
the pictures of the actual machines are pretty cool. They're pretty sweet. Are those renderings or are those actual machines?
Um, on the website, I don't
Yeah, they're
know.
sitting on
I
the
don't know
like
which
sitting
one
on
you're
the beach.
looking at. Let me have a look.
They're sitting on the beach. They're
Oh, those are
really
just
cool.
renders. Yeah. But
Okay.
that's exactly what the machine looks like before it's all dressed
Okay.
up in all of its insulation to make it super efficient. So
Gotcha.
yeah, and I just want to note that the blue sky thinking around these, because you're a blue sky thinker, I know, Mike,
Yeah.
is like if you put one of these on the beach in a Pacific island that is facing the problem of a slightly rising sea level, so their wells are becoming brackish, slightly salty, and what's happening is people are losing access to fresh water, and it's already happened throughout, sort of the central Pacific rim area there in the and what our
Wow.
machine can do, because it generates a lot of heat, is, you could have we are going to develop a plugin that allows you to purify that kind of brackish water. So, because what you need really is heat, and that's what we have in abundance. We can also dry plastic with it in a very, high humidity environment that needs to happen before you put it in the machine. So, there's an opportunity here for so many other industries to happen. And I want to point that out. Like, if you think of one of these Pacific islands, It's this idyllic island surrounded by this incredible coral reef. And like I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, there's more than 5,000 that we've looked at in the Pacific alone. And you have to drive the fuel that people are using in their generators over the reef. Imagine, when you, and the highest point on the island is the dump, and it's almost all fuel bottles that are being used to transport fuel to the island that are being left there because they're not worth it to take it back empty.
And
And
and all those fuel bottles are HD, or
they
majority of
are
them.
HD. They are HD. And so, if you can turn that problem into a microgrid solution for the island, and as we're all transitioning, Texas included, into renewables, what you're creating is an opportunity for a microgrid to be built there that can then be compounded and supported by solar. So, in 10 years' time, when all the plastic's gone and no one wants to use diesel and gas for power generation anymore because electric is so much more efficient, then that is what people will use in the end. And I think, we can be some of the folks who help that transition happen.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. We're gonna leave it right there. That's part one, dude.
Thank you.
Right.
I appreciate the time, Mike.
I appreciate the time. It was fantastic, Jeff. He's Jeff Barbee and co-founder Scarabtech, man. Scarabtech.com. Go find him. Scarabtech on LinkedIn, on Facebook as well, right?
And
You doing
Instagram, yeah.
TikTok videos, or are you done with the whole thing?
I don't know yet. Maybe we'll diversify. I'm still
Soon to
young.
be on TikTok.
Maybe I've got some TikTok moves in me. We'll give it a
Oh,
go.
dude, look at. Are you walking like an Egyptian?
I
Is that
can
are you
I can
showing
I
your
can
age?
walk like an Egyptian. I can moonwalk like Michael Jackson.
I love it, bro. Check out Scarab Tech. Thank you, Jeff. Everybody, peace and love.